Imagine being asleep in your own home in the early morning hours, surrounded by the comfort of your family, when suddenly chaos erupts without warning. The sound of a door shattering fills the air. A flashbang grenade detonates inside the living room, and armed federal agents rush through every corner of the house. You are dragged out in handcuffs while still half-dressed. Your partner is yanked out of a closet where he tried to hide in confusion and fear, and your young child stands in shock as guns are pointed at the people who should have been safest within those walls. Then imagine learning that all of this terror was the result of a simple but devastating mistake: the agents had the wrong house. That is not the beginning of a Hollywood thriller or a fictional drama, but the real experience of one family whose story climbed all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, leading to a unanimous ruling that has reshaped the conversation about accountability, government immunity, and the rights of ordinary citizens. This is the backdrop of the case known as Martin v. United States, and its roots go back to 2017 in a suburban neighborhood. At the center was an FBI team assigned to execute a pre-dawn raid on suspected gang members. The lead agent, instead of relying solely on official operational tools, chose to use his own personal GPS device to direct the team to what he believed was the target location. That single decision sent the convoy of law enforcement agents to the wrong address, arriving at the home of Katrina Martin, her partner, and their 7-year-old child. The raid unfolded in the dark before sunrise with the use of force one might expect in a dangerous criminal takedown. Agents smashed the front door, hurled flashbangs inside, and stormed the home with weapons drawn. The partner, who had scrambled into a closet in terror, was dragged out handcuffed and treated as a hostile suspect. Katrina herself was pulled out while half-clothed, placed at gunpoint, and detained alongside her young son. For several tense moments, the family had no idea who was invading their home or why. The confusion only ended when one of the agents noticed mail on a table that displayed a different address than the one they were supposed to target. It was at that moment that the horrifying realization hit them: they had raided the wrong house. Once the mistake was uncovered, the agents disengaged, but the damage had already been done. The trauma of the invasion lingered for the Martin family, who were left to deal with not only the emotional toll, but also the fundamental injustice of being subjected to such reckless force without cause. Understandably, they sought to hold the government accountable, filing a claim under the Federal Tort Claims Act, commonly referred to as the FTCA. This law allows private citizens to sue the federal government in certain circumstances when employees acting in the scope of their duties cause harm. It is in effect one of the rare avenues where ordinary people can challenge federal power in court. However, suing the federal government is never straightforward. The FTCA is filled with exceptions that shield the government from liability in many cases. Two of those exceptions would become central to this legal battle. The first is the intentional tort exception, which generally bars lawsuits for intentional wrongs, such as assault battery or false arrest. Yet Congress created what is called the law enforcement proviso, which carves out an opening if the misconduct is committed by a federal law enforcement officer empowered to execute searches or make arrests. Then citizens may still bring intentional tort claims against them. The second key exception is known as the discretionary function exception, which protects the government when an act results from discretionary decisions, choices involving judgment, policy considerations, or enforcement strategies. The government argued that the FBI's conduct in this case was covered by these shields. Specifically, they maintained that using a personal GPS device fell under discretionary functions, meaning the family could not sue. In the initial round, a federal district court agreed with the government, dismissing the case. On appeal, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals also sided with the government, reasoning that the agent's discretion in how to conduct the raid triggered immunity under the FTCA. But the family pressed forward, and eventually the case made its way to the highest court in the land. When the Supreme Court agreed to hear Martin v. United States, it set the stage for a showdown over just how much immunity the government can claim when its agents make grave mistakes. The question was simple, but monumental: could a family brutalized by an obvious wrong turn find any justice? Or would the government be able to escape responsibility by hiding behind legal technicalities? When the Supreme Court finally took up the case, it was more than just another dispute about procedure or a small corner of federal law. It was about whether a family that had endured a nightmare in their own home could pursue justice, or whether the federal government would once again be able to slam the door shut by claiming immunity. The justices were unanimous in their decision, and that in itself is a powerful statement. In an era when the court is often sharply divided along ideological lines, a 9-0 ruling shows just how clear the law can be when stripped to its core principles. To understand why the court ruled the way it did, it helps to break down the arguments that were on the table. The government leaned heavily on the discretionary function exception, arguing that decisions made by agents in the field, like which tools to use, how to plan a raid, or even which GPS system to rely on, fall within the protected realm of discretion. According to this theory, because the agent exercised judgment in choosing how to navigate to the target, the family's lawsuit was barred. The 11th Circuit had agreed, essentially granting near-total deference to law enforcement officers in such situations. But the Supreme Court saw it differently. Justice Neil Gorsuch, writing for the court, explained that while Congress did build in exceptions to liability under the FTCA, those exceptions are not meant to create blanket immunity whenever the government invokes the word discretion. Instead, the statute requires courts to measure government liability against what a private person would face under state law in similar circumstances. Put simply, if a private security company burst into the wrong house, threw grenades, and dragged innocent people into the street, state law would almost certainly recognize that as grounds for a lawsuit. The government does not get to escape that same standard simply by claiming its agents were acting in line with policy or discretion. The court also clarified the role of the law enforcement proviso. That proviso ensures that intentional torts committed by federal officers, such as assault, false arrest, or excessive force, are not automatically shielded by the FTCA. However, the proviso does not erase every other exception in the statute. What mattered here was how the exceptions interact, and the Supreme Court was crystal clear. The 11th Circuit had read them too broadly, giving the government an immunity that Congress never intended. This decision was not just about technical wording, it was about accountability. For years, families caught in wrong house raids or victims of mistaken identity have faced nearly insurmountable barriers when trying to hold the government responsible. Each time, officials claimed that their actions fell within the realm of discretion or policy. The Supreme Court's ruling signals that this shield cannot be used to cover every mistake, no matter how egregious. Importantly, the court did not decide the entire case in the family's favor outright. Instead, it vacated the 11th Circuit's judgment and sent the case back for further proceedings consistent with its opinion. This means the lower court must now re-examine whether the FBI agent's reliance on a personal GPS leading to the raid of the Martin home qualifies as discretionary in a way that still bars the claim. The door to justice has been reopened, but the family will still need to argue their case as it moves forward. Nevertheless, the implications are already significant. A unanimous Supreme Court has said that the government does not get to hide behind vague claims of discretion every time agents make mistakes. This narrows the scope of immunity and strengthens the ability of ordinary citizens to demand accountability. It reinforces the principle that federal agents are not above the law, and when they act in ways that harm innocent people, they can and should be held responsible in court. For many observers, this decision represents a victory not only for the Martin family, but for the broader concept of government accountability. It is a reminder that the Constitution and the laws Congress has written are meant to serve the people, not to shield the government from the consequences of its own errors. That point cannot be overstated, because without accountability, abuses of power go unchecked and trust in institutions erodes. The ruling also carries particular weight for communities where responsible gun ownership is common. Wrong house raids are not just terrifying accidents, they can become deadly encounters in an instant. Imagine being a homeowner awakened by what you believe are intruders breaking down your door in the middle of the night. In states where citizens have the right to defend their homes, that moment of confusion could lead to someone grabbing a firearm in self-defense. When armed federal agents are simultaneously rushing in with flashbangs and rifles, the risk of tragedy multiplies. Innocent people can be shot, officers can be injured, and lives can be permanently destroyed, all because of a mistake that should never have happened in the first place. By insisting that lawsuits like this one cannot be automatically shut down by invoking discretion, the Supreme Court has effectively reminded both the government and the public that accountability must remain at the heart of law enforcement operations. This decision makes clear that immunity is not a license for carelessness. When agents storm into the wrong home, traumatizing families and potentially sparking violent confrontations, the victims deserve the chance to be heard in court. They deserve the chance to prove their case and seek redress. For the Martin family, the journey is not over. Their case now returns to the 11th Circuit, which must reconsider its earlier dismissal under the guidance of the Supreme Court's ruling. That process will take time, and the outcome is still uncertain. Yet what cannot be taken away is the fact that the highest court in the nation unanimously rejected the government's sweeping claim of immunity. That alone is a milestone. It establishes precedent for similar cases across the country, ensuring that other families who suffer from wrongful raids or excessive force will not be turned away without the chance to argue their claims. It is important to recognize just how rare a unanimous Supreme Court decision can be on issues touching law enforcement and government power. A 9-0 outcome signals that, across the ideological spectrum, the justices recognize the danger of allowing unchecked discretion to shield reckless actions. This unity adds weight to the decision and makes it less likely to be eroded by narrow readings in the future. It is a clear message that when the government crosses the line, the people must still have a path to justice. For viewers, the takeaway is both sobering and hopeful. Sobering because the Martin case illustrates how easily a mistake can spiral into a life-altering ordeal for innocent families. Hopeful because it demonstrates that even against powerful government arguments, ordinary people can prevail when the law is on their side. The system, flawed as it may be, still offers avenues for accountability when the courts are willing to apply the law as written. So, as this case heads back to the lower court, the story is not finished. We will continue to watch how the 11th Circuit responds and whether the Martin family can finally obtain justice after years of struggle. In the meantime, remember that awareness of these issues matters. Stay informed, stay engaged, and if you found this breakdown useful, don't forget to like the video, share it with others who care about these issues, and subscribe so you won't miss updates as this story develops.